Welcome to HOA Outplayed. The HOA wanted control, not safety. I do not care what you think you saw. Karen shouted that she could call a second truck and make this happen faster. The tow driver was already lowering the wheel lift toward my sedan, and I was standing in my own driveway in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, holding my phone up to record every word. The Commons at Maplewood Ridge Association had been escalating for weeks, but this was the first time Cynthia Young had actually rolled a truck up to my house without even leaving a written notice first. I work as a notary public, so I keep everything documented, every email, every timestamp, every rule citation, and right now I was watching the fines and enforcement coordinator for the HOA try to tow my car, while claiming it was blocking emergency access when it was parked square in my own driveway spot. Cynthia crossed her arms and pointed at the driver. "Just do it," she said. "I am the reason this neighborhood stays civilized, and if he thinks he can park guests here without a decal for 3 days straight, he is about to learn how we enforce the rules." The driver hesitated, looking between her and me. I stepped forward, keeping the camera steady. "My guest had a temporary pass on the dashboard the entire time," I said. "I emailed the office photos 2 days ago." Cynthia waved her hand like she was swatting a fly. "Your camera does not matter. My minutes are the truth," she said. I felt my chest tighten, because she had just said the line that would come back to haunt her, and I made sure the recording caught every syllable. The driver glanced at his clipboard. "Ma'am, I need the signed authorization before I hook it up," he said. Cynthia pulled a folded policy sheet from her jacket and shoved it in my face. No readable text visible, but I could see the association logo at the top. "This is your authorization," she snapped. "The board voted last month to enforce guest parking violations on site, and you are in violation." I took a step back, still recording. "I never received any notice about a new guest parking policy," I said. "And my car is not in a guest spot. It is in my assigned driveway." She laughed, a short bark that made the driver flinch. "The driveway is association property," she said. "Everything from the curb to your front door is under our jurisdiction, and the new rules say any vehicle without a current decal gets towed." The driver bent down and snapped the tire clamp onto my front wheel before I could even process what was happening. The orange metal locked tight, and he stood up, brushing his hands on his pants. "All set," he said. "You can call the office to arrange removal once the fine is paid." I stared at the clamp, feeling the situation tilt out of control. "How much is the fine?" I asked. Cynthia smiled, pulling out her phone. $200 for the violation, $150 for the tow authorization, and $75 for the immobilizer," she said. "Plus a $50 processing fee and a daily storage charge if you do not pay within 24 hours. That is $525 total, due by tomorrow at 5. She tapped her screen like she was entering the charges right there. I kept recording, my hand shaking slightly. "I am rebuilding after a move, and I cannot take more disruption," I said. "I just signed the closing papers 3 weeks ago, and I have been working double shifts at the notary office to cover the down payment gap. This is not a legitimate fine, and you know it." Cynthia stepped closer, her face filling my phone screen. "I know that you think rules do not apply to you," she said. "But here at the Commons at Maplewood Ridge, we take compliance seriously, and I have been the fines and enforcement coordinator for 6 years. I do not make mistakes." She turned to the driver. "If he does not pay by tomorrow, you have authorization to tow it to the yard," she said. The driver nodded slowly, like he was trying to figure out if this was legal. I watched the driver walk back to his truck and pull out a bright sticker, then slap it on my driver's side window. The adhesive made a wet sound against the glass, and I could see the bold warning shape but no readable text. He climbed into his truck without another word and drove off, leaving Cynthia standing in my driveway with her arms crossed and a satisfied smirk on her face. "You have until 5 tomorrow," she said. "After that, it goes to the yard and you pay the daily rate." She turned and walked toward the street, pulling her whistle from around her neck and blowing a short, sharp blast like she was signaling victory. I stood there staring at the clamp, my heart pounding. A neighbor across the street was watering his lawn, and he paused mid-spray to stare at the scene, the hose hanging loose in his hand. I gave him a small wave, trying to look calm, but inside I was calculating how fast I could pull together proof that this whole thing was a setup. I walked inside and sat down at my kitchen table, pulling up the video I had just recorded. Cynthia's voice came through clear on playback. "Your camera does not matter. My minutes are the truth." I replayed it 3 times, and each time I felt a little more confident. She had just handed me leverage, and I gave her a small thank you, because she just handed me leverage. I opened my email and started searching for the original guest parking policy. The Commons at Maplewood Ridge Association had sent a welcome packet when I closed on the house, and buried in the attachments was a PDF with the parking rules. I skimmed through it, my pulse picking up as I read the section on guest decals. Guests are permitted to park in designated guest spaces or resident driveways with a temporary pass displayed on the dashboard, valid for up to 7 consecutive days. Violations will be addressed with a written warning followed by a $50 fine if not corrected within 72 hours. There was nothing about towing on site, nothing about immobilizers, and nothing about driveways being classified as guest parking zones. I took a screenshot and saved it with a timestamp. Then I pulled up the HOA management portal and logged in. The system was clunky, built sometime in the early 2000s and never updated, but it had a violations history tab that showed every fine issued in the neighborhood. I filtered by my address and saw 3 entries, all dated within the last 2 weeks. The first was listed as a guest parking warning, the second was a repeat violation escalation, and the third was the tow authorization Cynthia had just executed. I clicked on the tow authorization entry and saw that it had been logged at 3:15 this afternoon, which was exactly 8 minutes before the truck arrived. There was no way the board had reviewed and approved a tow request in 8 minutes, and the policy required board approval for any enforcement action over $100. I grabbed my phone and called the management company listed on the HOA documents. A woman answered on the 3rd ring, her voice flat and professional. "Summit Ridge Property Management. This is Angela," she said. I explained the situation as calmly as I could, walking her through the timeline and the lack of notice. Angela sighed, and I could hear her typing in the background. "Let me pull up your account," she said. There was a long pause, then she came back on. "Okay, I see the entries here. It looks like Cynthia logged a series of escalations over the past 2 weeks, but I do not see any board meeting minutes authorizing a tow action." She paused again. "That is unusual," she said. "Normally we require a board vote for anything involving a tow vendor." I felt a flicker of hope. "So this was not authorized," I said. Angela hesitated. "I cannot say that definitively without reviewing the meeting records," she said. "But based on what I am seeing in the system, it looks like Cynthia may have bypassed the standard process. I would recommend filing a formal complaint and requesting a hearing." I thanked her and hung up, my mind already racing ahead. I needed more than just a complaint. I needed proof that Cynthia had been running this scheme without oversight, and I needed it fast, because the HOA was claiming a new enforcement wave started at midnight, and Karen was using the clock like a weapon. I clicked my pen against the table, the rhythm helping me think. The policy sheet Cynthia had shoved in my face kept coming back to me, the way she had waved it around like it was a legal document but refused to let me read it. I pulled up my email again and searched for any recent board announcements. Nothing. I checked the neighborhood group chat, a chaotic mess of complaints and rumors, and scrolled back 2 weeks. There was a thread about parking enforcement, but it was just neighbors arguing about guest spots, no mention of a new tow policy. Then I saw a message from someone named Rita, posted 4 days ago. "Be careful with guest parking," she wrote. "Cynthia had my sister's car towed last week even though it had a pass. She said the vendor does not need board approval anymore." I screenshot the message and added it to my evidence folder. Then I opened a new browser tab and pulled up the City of Pittsburgh Municipal Code. I searched for parking enforcement and found the section on private towing. In Pennsylvania, a property owner or authorized agent must provide written notice of a violation before towing a vehicle from private property, except in cases of immediate safety hazards or clearly posted tow-away zones. I read the statute twice, my heart pounding. Cynthia had not given me written notice, and my driveway was not a posted tow-away zone. The clamp was illegal, and the tow threat was illegal, and she had done it all on camera. I saved the municipal code citation and sent it to my phone. Then I walked back outside and took photos of the tire clamp from every angle, making sure to capture the lack of any signage or posted warnings in my driveway. The neighbor across the street was still watching, his hose now coiled on the ground. I waved again, and he walked over slowly, his hands in his pockets. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Just dealing with HOA nonsense," I said. He shook his head. Cynthia has been pulling this stuff for months, he said. She got my buddy Kevin last month, charged him $400 for parking his work van in his own driveway overnight. Kevin paid it because he did not want the hassle, but everyone knows she is on some kind of power trip. I felt a surge of anger. Did Kevin fight it? I asked. The neighbor shook his head. He talked to the board, but they said Cynthia has the authority to enforce parking rules without their approval, he said. Something about a compliance delegation they voted on last year. I thanked him and went back inside, adding his account to my mental notes. If the board had delegated enforcement authority to Cynthia, that might explain how she was bypassing normal procedures. But it did not make the tow legal under city code. I needed to find out exactly what the board had approved, and I needed to do it before 5 o'clock tomorrow when Cynthia could escalate to a full tow. I spent the next hour combing through the HOA bylaws and meeting minutes archived on the management portal. Most of the documents were scanned PDFs, barely readable, but I found a meeting summary from 11 months ago that mentioned a motion to delegate day-to-day enforcement to the fines coordinator. The motion had passed with a 4-to-1 vote, and the minutes noted that the dissenting board member had raised concerns about accountability. I screenshot the page and highlighted the dissenting vote. If one board member had been worried about Cynthia's authority, that meant there was internal disagreement, and internal disagreement meant leverage. I called Angela at the management company again. She picked up after 2 rings, sounding slightly annoyed. Summit Ridge Property Management, she said. I apologized for calling back so soon and asked if she could pull the full meeting minutes from the enforcement delegation vote. Angela paused. I can email those to you, but it will take a day or 2, she said. I do not have a day or 2, I said. The fine is due tomorrow at 5, and if I do not pay, they are going to tow my car to a yard and start charging daily storage. Angela sighed. Let me see what I can do, she said. I will try to get them to you by tonight. I thanked her and hung up, feeling the time pressure tighten like a noose. The sky outside was darkening, and I could hear thunder rumbling in the distance, a low growl that seemed to match my mood. I grabbed a jacket and walked down to the end of my driveway, staring at the tire clamp in the fading light. The orange metal looked almost neon against the gray asphalt, and the tow warning sticker on my window glowed faintly in the last rays of sun. I took another photo, zooming in on the clamp mechanism, then turned and saw Cynthia walking up the street toward me. She was carrying a clipboard and wearing the same purple windbreaker, her whistle bouncing against her chest with each step. I braced myself, keeping my phone in my hand but not raising it yet. Cynthia stopped at the edge of my driveway and tapped her pen against the clipboard. Just checking to make sure you understand the timeline, she said. Payment is due by 5 tomorrow, and if I do not see a confirmation email by then, the truck comes back and your car goes to the yard. The daily rate is $75, and the retrieval fee is another $200. She smiled, a thin line that did not reach her eyes. I would recommend paying tonight to avoid the extra charges. I kept my voice steady. I am not paying a fine for a violation that did not happen, I said. My guest had a valid pass, and my car is parked in my assigned driveway. Cynthia clicked her pen, the sound sharp in the quiet street. Your guest pass was expired, she said. And even if it was not, the new policy requires all guest vehicles to display a decal issued by the office, not a handwritten pass. I stared at her. There is no new policy, I said. I checked the bylaws and the parking rules, and there is nothing about decals. Cynthia's smile widened. The board approved the update last month, she said. It is effective immediately, and ignorance of the rules is not an excuse. I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshot of the original parking policy. I held it up so she could see the screen. This is the policy in the welcome packet, I said. It says guests can use a temporary pass for up to 7 days, and there is no mention of decals. Cynthia glanced at the screen and shrugged. That is an outdated version, she said. The board updates policies quarterly, and you are responsible for checking the portal for changes. I felt my frustration rising. I checked the portal an hour ago, I said. There is no new policy posted. Cynthia tapped her clipboard again. Then you did not look hard enough, she said. The policy is in the compliance section under amendments, and it has been there since the 15th of last month. I made a mental note to check the amendments section as soon as I got back inside. Cynthia turned to leave, then paused, and looked back over her shoulder. By the way, she said, the tow vendor we use is very reliable. They have been working with the association for 3 years, and they always follow through. I am the reason this neighborhood stays civilized, and people like you who think the rules do not apply are exactly why we need strong enforcement." She walked away before I could respond, her footsteps echoing on the pavement. If you are enjoying this story, hit the like button and subscribe for more HOA drama. I went back inside and pulled up the portal compliance section. It took me 10 minutes to find the amendments tab, buried under 3 layers of menus, and when I finally opened it, I saw a single document dated the 15th of last month. I clicked on it and waited for the PDF to load. The document was titled Updated Guest Parking Enforcement Protocol, and it outlined a new system requiring all guest vehicles to obtain a windshield decal from the office within 24 hours of arrival. Vehicles without decals would be subject to immediate immobilization or towing at the owner's expense, with no prior warning required. The document was signed by Cynthia Young, Fines and Enforcement Coordinator, but there was no board approval stamp or meeting reference number. I screenshot the document and added it to my evidence folder. Then I sent an email to Angela at the management company, attaching the screenshot and asking if the board had voted to approve the new protocol. I also asked for a copy of the vendor contract with the tow company, because I wanted to see if there was any language about board oversight. Angela replied within 20 minutes, her message terse. "I will look into this and get back to you tomorrow morning." In the meantime, I recommend not taking any action that could escalate the situation. I stared at the email, feeling the weight of the ticking clock. Tomorrow morning might be too late. I decided to call the tow company directly. I found their number on the sticker the driver had left on my window and dialed. A man answered, his voice gruff. "AAA Metro Towing, this is Dan," he said. I explained who I was and asked about the clamp on my car. Dan sighed. "Yeah, I sent Bobby out there this afternoon," he said. "The HOA lady called and said it was an emergency access violation, so we went ahead and immobilized it." I asked if he had seen a board authorization, and there was a long pause. "We do not usually ask for board docs," he said. "The HOA coordinator is listed as the point of contact on our contract, so if she calls, we respond. That is how it has worked for 3 years." I felt a flicker of hope. "Can you send me a copy of the contract?" I asked. Dan laughed, a short bark. "No way, that is proprietary," he said. "But I can tell you that our agreement is with the association, not individual homeowners, so if you have a problem with the tow, you need to take it up with the HOA." I thanked him and hung up, adding his comments to my notes. If the tow company was operating on Cynthia's word alone, that meant she had been using the vendor as a personal enforcement tool, and the board might not even know how often she was calling them. I spent the rest of the evening drafting a formal complaint letter. I outlined the timeline, attached screenshots of the original parking policy, the new protocol document, the municipal code citation, and the video of Cynthia threatening the tow. I addressed the letter to the HOA board and CC'd Angela at the management company. Then I saved it and set an alarm for 6 in the morning, because I wanted to send it first thing and give the board time to respond before the 5 o'clock deadline. I went to bed feeling slightly more in control, but the image of the orange tire clamp kept flashing in my mind every time I closed my eyes. The next morning I woke up to a text from Angela. "I have the meeting minutes you requested. Call me when you are up." I called her immediately, still in my pajamas. Angela answered on the first ring. "Okay, so I reviewed the minutes from the enforcement delegation vote," she said. The board did approve giving Cynthia authority to issue fines and schedule tows, but there is a clause that says any enforcement action over $200 requires board notification within 24 hours. She paused. "Based on the timeline you sent me, Cynthia did not notify the board before immobilizing your car, which means she violated the delegation terms." I felt a surge of relief. "So the clamp was unauthorized," I said. Angela hesitated. "Technically, yes," she said, "but the board can retroactively approve it if they vote at the next meeting, which is not until next week. In the meantime, you are still on the hook for the fine unless you file an appeal and get a hearing scheduled." I thanked her and asked if she could send me the minutes. She promised to email them within the hour. I hung up and sent my complaint letter to the board, copying Angela and adding a note that I was requesting an emergency hearing to review the enforcement action before the 5 o'clock deadline. By 9 in the morning I still had not heard back from the board, so I decided to take a more direct approach. I looked up the home address of the board president, a man named Greg Fallon, and drove over to his house. Greg answered the door in a bathrobe, holding a coffee mug. I introduced myself and explained the situation as quickly as I could. Greg frowned, his eyebrows pulling together. "Cynthia did what?" he said. I showed him the video on my phone, and he watched in silence, his jaw tightening. "This is not how we do things," he said. The board voted to give her enforcement authority, but she was supposed to notify us before taking any major action. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Let me call an emergency board meeting for tonight," he said. "I cannot promise we will resolve it before your deadline, but I will do my best." I thanked him and drove back home, feeling cautiously optimistic. But when I pulled into my driveway, I saw Cynthia standing next to my car, talking on her phone. She glanced at me as I got out, then turned away and kept talking. I walked closer, trying to hear what she was saying. The words I caught made my stomach drop. "Yeah, I want you to hook it up and take it to the yard tonight if he does not pay by 5, she said. "I do not care if the board has questions. This is my call and I am authorized to make it." She hung up and looked at me with a smug expression. "Just confirming the tow," she said. "The truck will be here at 5:05 if I do not see payment." I kept my voice calm. "Greg Fallon is calling an emergency board meeting tonight to review your enforcement actions," I said. "You might want to hold off on the tow until after that." Cynthia laughed, the same sharp bark from yesterday. "Greg does not run enforcement, I do," she said. "The board gave me the authority, and I am using it. If you have a problem, you can appeal after you pay the fine." She turned and walked toward the street, pulling her whistle out and blowing a short blast. I stood there staring at the tire clamp, my mind racing. I had one more card to play, and it was time to use it. I went inside and called the city code enforcement office. A woman answered, her voice professional and brisk. "Pittsburgh Code Enforcement, this is Sarah," she said. I explained the situation and asked if a private HOA could tow a vehicle from a resident's driveway without written notice. Sarah paused, and I could hear her typing. "Let me check the ordinance," she said. There was a long silence, then she came back on. "Okay, so under Pittsburgh Municipal Code, a property owner or authorized agent must provide written notice of a parking violation at least 24 hours before towing, unless the vehicle is blocking emergency access or is in a clearly posted tow-away zone. If your car is in your own driveway and you did not receive written notice, the tow would be considered unlawful." I felt a rush of vindication. "Can you send me a confirmation of that in writing?" I asked. Sarah hesitated. "I can email you a copy of the relevant code section," she said. "But if you want formal enforcement, you would need to file a complaint, and we would send an inspector out to review the situation." I gave her my email address and asked how long it would take to get an inspector. She said it could be a few days, which was not helpful given my 5 o'clock deadline, but I thanked her anyway and hung up. A few minutes later, the email arrived with the code section attached. I screenshot it and added it to my evidence folder. Then I called a friend of mine who works as a real estate attorney. His name is Marcus, and we went to college together. Marcus picked up on the second ring. "Hey man, what is going on?" he said. I gave him the quick version, and he listened without interrupting. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. "That is pretty aggressive, even for an HOA," he said. "Based on what you are telling me, the immobilizer was illegal under city code, and the fine structure sounds like it might violate Pennsylvania debt collection laws. If they are adding fees without board approval, that could be considered fraudulent billing." He paused. "I can draft a cease and desist letter for you, but it will take a day or two. Do you have time for that?" I told him about the 5 o'clock deadline, and he swore under his breath. "That is tight," he said. "Let me see if I can expedite it, but in the meantime, do not pay the fine. If you pay, it will be a lot harder to challenge later because they will argue you acknowledged the validity of the charge." I thanked him and hung up, feeling the pressure ratchet up another notch. It was almost noon, which meant I had less than 5 hours before Cynthia could call the tow truck. I needed to move faster. I decided to reach out to Rita, the woman who had posted in the neighborhood group chat about her sister's tow. I found her contact info in the chat member list and sent her a direct message. "Hi Rita. I am dealing with a similar situation with Cynthia and the tow vendor. Would you be willing to share what happened with your sister's car?" Rita responded within minutes. "Oh man, I am so sorry you are going through this," she wrote. My sister parked in my driveway for 2 days with a guest pass, and Cynthia had it towed anyway. She said the pass was not valid because it was handwritten instead of printed from the office, which is insane because the office does not even issue printed passes. My sister paid the fine because she did not want to fight it, but I have been keeping records of every shady thing Cynthia does. Do you want copies? I replied immediately. Yes, please send me everything you have. Rita sent me a zip file with photos, emails, and a spreadsheet tracking enforcement actions over the past 6 months. I opened the spreadsheet and felt my jaw drop. Cynthia had issued over 40 fines in 6 months, totaling more than $15,000 in fees. Most of them were for guest parking violations, but there were also fines for trash can placement, lawn maintenance, and noise complaints. The pattern was clear. Cynthia was running a revenue operation disguised as rule enforcement, and the board either did not know or did not care. I forwarded the spreadsheet to Angela at the management company and CC'd Greg Fallon. Then I called Rita and asked if she would be willing to attend the emergency board meeting tonight as a witness. She agreed immediately. I have been waiting for someone to push back, she said. Cynthia has been bullying people for months, and the board just lets her do it because she brings in money. I thanked her and added her contact info to my notes. I was starting to feel like I had enough evidence to make a real case, but the clock was still ticking and I needed to stop the tow before it happened. At 2 o'clock I got a text from Marcus. Cease and desist letter is done. I am emailing it to you now, and I also sent a copy to the tow company and the HOA board. The letter states that the immobilizer was placed without lawful notice, the fine structure is not supported by the bylaws, and any attempt to tow the vehicle will result in legal action. That should buy you some time. I opened the email and read the letter, feeling a surge of gratitude. Marcus had included citations to Pennsylvania towing law, the Pittsburgh Municipal Code, and the HOA's own delegation terms. It was a clean professional document that made it clear I was not going to roll over. I printed a copy and walked outside to take another set of photos. The tire clamp was still locked tight, and the tow warning sticker was still on my window. I noticed a traffic cone had appeared near the end of my driveway, kicked aside like someone had tried to mark off the area. I moved it back to the curb and took a photo of the cone placement. Then I heard a car pull up behind me and turned to see Cynthia stepping out of a silver sedan. She was holding a clipboard and her whistle, and she walked toward me with a determined stride. I see you have been busy, she said, nodding toward my phone. Sending emails, making calls, trying to stir up trouble. I kept my expression neutral. I am exercising my right to challenge an unlawful enforcement action, I said. Cynthia stopped a few feet away and tapped her pen against the clipboard. You can challenge all you want, but the fine is still due at 5, she said, and if you do not pay, your car gets towed. I am the reason this neighborhood stays civilized, and I am not going to let one entitled homeowner undermine the whole system. I felt a flash of anger, but kept my voice steady. I received a cease and desist letter from my attorney, I said. It was sent to you, the board, and the tow company. If you proceed with the tow, you will be in violation of Pennsylvania law. Cynthia's smile faltered for a second, then she recovered. I do not care what some lawyer says, she snapped. The board gave me authority, and I am using it. She turned and walked back to her car, then paused and looked over her shoulder. 5 o'clock, she said. Do not say I did not warn you. She drove off, and I stood there feeling the weight of the confrontation settle in my chest. I had 3 hours left, and I still did not know if the cease and desist would be enough to stop her. At 3:30, I got a call from Greg Fallon. The emergency board meeting is set for 6 tonight, he said. I know that is after your deadline, but I talked to Angela at the management company and she agreed to send a hold notice to the tow vendor. That should prevent them from taking any action until the board has a chance to review the situation. I felt a flood of relief. Thank you, I said. Greg sighed. Look, I am not happy about how Cynthia has been handling enforcement, he said. This is not what we voted for when we delegated authority. I am going to recommend that the board suspend her enforcement privileges until we can do a full audit. I thanked him again and hung up, feeling like I had just cleared a major hurdle. But at 4:45, I heard the rumble of a diesel engine and looked out the window to see the tow truck pulling up to my driveway. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my phone and ran outside, my heart pounding. The driver, the same guy from yesterday, was already stepping out of the cab. I waved at him, and he stopped. "Hey, I thought the management company sent a hold notice," I said. The driver shrugged. "I did not get anything," he said. "I got a call from the HOA lady 20 minutes ago saying to go ahead and hook it up." I felt a surge of panic. "That is not authorized," I said. "There is a board meeting tonight to review this, and the tow is on hold until then." The driver pulled out his phone and showed me a text message. It was from Cynthia, timestamped at 4:28. "Proceed with the tow as scheduled. Board meeting is irrelevant to enforcement actions." I screenshot the message with my phone, then pulled up Marcus's cease and desist letter and showed it to the driver. He read it slowly, his expression shifting from confusion to frustration. "Man, I do not want to get in the middle of this," he said. "I am just doing my job." I kept my voice calm but firm. "If you tow this car, you will be named in a lawsuit for unlawful towing under Pennsylvania Code," I said. "The letter spells it out." The driver stared at the letter, then at my car, then back at me. He let out a long breath. "I am going to call my boss," he said. He walked back to his truck and made a call, and I stood there watching the minutes tick by. At 4:55 he came back over. "My boss says to hold off until he talks to the HOA," he said. "He does not want to deal with a lawsuit." I thanked him, and he climbed back into his truck and drove off. I stood in my driveway, feeling the adrenaline drain out of me, and watched Cynthia's car pull up a minute later. She got out and stared at the empty street where the tow truck had been. "Where is the truck?" she demanded. I told her the driver decided not to proceed, and she turned red. "You have got to be kidding me," she shouted. "I authorized that tow, and he is under contract to follow through." I held up my phone, showing her the screenshot of the driver's text and the cease and desist letter. "He is under contract with the HOA, not with you personally," I said, "and the board has called a hold on all enforcement actions until tonight's meeting." Cynthia stepped closer, her face inches from mine. "This is not over," she said. "I am going to that meeting, and I am going to make sure the board knows exactly what kind of person you are." She turned and walked back to her car, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. I stood there watching her drive off, feeling a grim satisfaction. I had stopped the tow, but the real fight was about to start. The board meeting started at 6, held in the community center at the entrance to the neighborhood. I arrived early and found Rita already there, sitting in the front row with a folder of documents. Greg Fallon was setting up a laptop at the head table, and Angela from the management company was seated off to the side with her own stack of papers. Cynthia walked in at 6:02, her face set in a hard mask, and took a seat in the back row. She did not look at me. Greg called the meeting to order and explained the situation briefly. "We are here to review an enforcement action taken by the fines coordinator," he said. "I have received multiple complaints and concerns, and I want to hear from both parties before the board makes a decision." I stood up and gave my account, walking through the timeline and showing the video of Cynthia authorizing the tow. I explained the lack of written notice, the discrepancies in the policy documents, and the cease and desist letter from my attorney. Then I turned to the board and said, "I also want to raise a broader concern about enforcement practices. I have documentation showing over 40 fines issued in the past 6 months, many of them without proper notice or board oversight." I handed copies of Rita's spreadsheet to each board member, and I watched their faces change as they scanned the numbers. Cynthia stood up, her voice sharp. "Those fines are all legitimate," she said. "Every single one was issued under the authority the board gave me, and every homeowner had the opportunity to appeal." Greg held up a hand. "We will get to that," he said. "But first I want to address the specific tow action." He turned to Angela. "Did the board approve this tow?" Angela shook her head. "No," she said. "The minutes show that the board delegated enforcement authority, but the delegation terms require notification within 24 hours for any action over $200. That did not happen here." Greg nodded. "Then the tow was unauthorized," he said. He looked at Cynthia. "You overstepped your authority." Cynthia crossed her arms. "I did what I thought was necessary to enforce the rules," she said. "If the board has a problem with that, maybe they should take a more active role instead of dumping everything on me." Greg's expression hardened. "We gave you authority, not carte blanche," he said. "You were supposed to follow the process, and you did not." He turned back to me. "I am going to recommend that the board void the fine and remove the immobilizer immediately. I also want to schedule a full audit of all enforcement actions over the past year. I felt a wave of relief, but I knew the fight was not over yet. One of the other board members, a woman named Sandra, raised her hand. "I have a question about the tow vendor contract," she said. "Angela, can you pull that up?" Angela opened her laptop and navigated to the management portal, then shared her screen on the projector. The contract appeared, and I leaned forward to read it. Sandra scanned the document, then stopped and pointed at a section near the bottom. "This contract expired 4 months ago," she said. Her voice was tight. "We have been using an expired vendor agreement." The room went silent. Greg stared at the screen, his jaw working. "Angela, why was this not flagged?" he said. Angela looked flustered. "I do not know," she said. "The contract should have been auto-renewed, but it looks like the vendor never submitted the renewal paperwork. We have been operating under the assumption that the original terms were still active." Cynthia stood up, her voice rising. "That is not my problem," she said. "I was told the vendor was under contract, and I acted accordingly." Sandra turned to face her. "You are the enforcement coordinator," she said. "It is your job to verify that vendors are properly contracted before you authorize them to take action on association property." Cynthia's face went red. "I am not a lawyer," she snapped. "I rely on the management company to handle contracts. This is not my fault." Greg shook his head. "It does not matter whose fault it is," he said. "The fact is, we have been authorizing tows under an expired contract, which means every tow over the past 4 months could be challenged as unlawful." He looked at Angela. "How many tows have there been?" Angela pulled up another screen. 14, she said. Her voice was quiet, all authorized by Cynthia. The board members exchanged glances, and I could see the calculation happening in real time. This was bigger than one disputed fine. This was a liability nightmare. Sandra turned back to me. "Do you have documentation of the expired contract?" she asked. I nodded and held up my phone. "I requested a copy of the contract from the tow company this morning, and they sent me a version that shows the expiration date," I said. "I am happy to provide it to the board." Sandra nodded. "Please do," she said. "We need to review this immediately and determine what our exposure is." Greg stood up, his expression grim. "I am calling for a motion to suspend all enforcement actions by the fines coordinator pending a full audit," he said. "Do I have a second?" Sandra raised her hand. "Motion carries," Greg said. "Cynthia, you are suspended from enforcement duties effective immediately." Cynthia's mouth opened, then closed. She looked around the room, her face a mix of shock and fury. "This is ridiculous," she said. "I have been doing this job for 6 years and now you are going to throw me under the bus because of one mistake?" Greg's voice was cold. "It is not one mistake," he said. "It is a pattern of overreach, and the board is not willing to take on the legal risk. You will be notified when the audit is complete, and we will make a decision about your role at that time." Cynthia stood there for a moment, her hands clenched into fists, then she turned and stormed out of the room. The door slammed behind her, and the sound echoed in the silence. Greg turned back to me. "I apologize for the situation," he said. "The board will arrange for the immobilizer to be removed tonight, and the fine will be voided. We will also be conducting a review of all fines issued over the past year, and if we find any that were improperly charged, we will issue refunds." I thanked him, feeling the tension in my chest finally start to ease. Rita stood up and addressed the board. "I want to make sure this review is transparent," she said. "A lot of homeowners have been afraid to push back because they do not want to deal with retaliation. If the board is serious about fixing this, you need to communicate that to the neighborhood." Greg nodded. "We will send an email to all homeowners by the end of the week," he said, "and we will hold a town hall meeting to discuss the audit findings." I left the meeting feeling cautiously optimistic, but I knew the real test would be whether the board followed through. Over the next 2 weeks, Angela emailed me regular updates on the audit. She found multiple cases where Cynthia had issued fines without proper documentation, added fees that were not listed in the bylaws, and authorized tows without board notification. The total improper charges came to over $8,000 across 23 homeowners. The board voted to refund every cent, and they also voted to terminate Cynthia's position as fines coordinator. She resigned from the board entirely the day after the vote, and I have not seen her in the neighborhood since. The tire clamp was removed the night of the meeting, and I got a formal apology letter from Greg Fallon a week later. The letter included a copy of the updated enforcement policy, which now required written notice for all violations and board approval for any tow action over $100. The new policy also established an appeals process with a neutral third-party mediator, so homeowners could challenge fines without fear of retaliation. I filed the letter with the rest of my documentation, feeling a sense of closure, but also a lingering wariness. HOAs are only as good as the people who run them, and it only takes one power-hungry enforcer to turn a neighborhood into a battleground. A month after the audit was completed, I got a call from Rita. She had been elected to the board in a special election, and she wanted to let me know that the board had voted to hire a new management company. Summit Ridge Property Management had been let go after the audit revealed that they had failed to flag the expired vendor contract and had not properly overseen Cynthia's enforcement actions. The new management company specialized in community associations, and they had already implemented a digital transparency portal where homeowners could see all enforcement actions, board meeting minutes, and vendor contracts in real time. Rita said the neighborhood felt different, lighter, like people were not walking on eggshells anymore. I also got a call from Dan at the tow company. He apologized for the confusion and said that his company had decided not to renew any HOA contracts after the audit findings became public. He said the whole situation had been a wake-up call about the risks of working with enforcement coordinators who operated without oversight. I thanked him for the call and told him I appreciated the honesty. It was a small gesture, but it felt like validation that pushing back had been worth it. The funny thing about the whole ordeal was the way Cynthia's own words came back to haunt her. At the town hall meeting the board held to discuss the audit, they played a recording of the board meeting where Cynthia had defended her enforcement actions. When the recording reached the part where she said, "I did what I thought was necessary to enforce the rules," one of the homeowners in the audience raised his hand and asked if that meant she had knowingly bypassed the board's oversight requirements. The room went quiet, and the board president had to pause the recording to address the question. It became clear in that moment that Cynthia had dug her own hole, and her insistence that she had the authority to act unilaterally was the very thing that disqualified her from the role. The payoff came when the board's audit uncovered a records request that exposed contradictions and edits in Cynthia's enforcement logs. A homeowner named Kevin, the same guy my neighbor had mentioned early on, had filed a public records request for all enforcement actions over the past year. When the board compared the logs Cynthia had submitted to the management company with the logs stored on her personal laptop, they found discrepancies. Fines had been backdated, amounts had been changed, and some entries had been deleted entirely. The board forwarded the findings to a forensic accountant, who confirmed that the edits constituted falsification of records. The board voted to refer the matter to local authorities, and Cynthia ended up settling the case quietly to avoid criminal charges. As part of the settlement, she agreed to repay the full amount of the improper fees and to resign from any HOA leadership role permanently. Karen got embarrassed when her own quote played on speaker during the settlement negotiation, when the forensic accountant played back a recording of the board meeting where Cynthia had said, "Your camera does not matter. My minutes are the truth." The accountant pointed out that the minutes had been altered multiple times, which directly contradicted her claim that they were the definitive record. Cynthia had no answer, and the settlement was finalized within a week. The HOA dropped the case to avoid a public records mess, but the damage to Cynthia's reputation was permanent. She moved out of the neighborhood 2 months later, and the for sale sign on her lawn stayed up for nearly 6 months before the house finally sold. Karen repeated a threat during the settlement negotiation, insisting that she had the authority to enforce rules as she saw fit, and the recording of that statement was played back to the board as evidence of her pattern of overreach. It became a running joke in the neighborhood, and people would sometimes quote it sarcastically when discussing the new enforcement policies. The whole experience taught me that HOAs can be tools for community or weapons for control, depending on who is holding the reins, and that documentation is the only real defense against someone who thinks the rules do not apply to them. Looking back, the moment that stands out most is the night the tire clamp was finally removed. The tow company sent a different driver, a younger guy who apologized for the whole mess as he unlocked the mechanism. He said his boss had chewed him out for not verifying the board authorization before placing the clamp, and the company had implemented a new policy requiring written confirmation for all enforcement actions. I watched the orange metal fall away from my tire, and I felt a weight lift that I had not realized I was carrying. The clamp had been a symbol of everything wrong with the system, a physical manifestation of unchecked authority, and seeing it removed felt like reclaiming something that had been taken from me. The neighborhood is quieter now, in a good way. People still complain about the HOA, because that is what people do, but the complaints are about normal things like landscaping schedules and pool maintenance, not about predatory enforcement and surprise fines. I still keep all my documentation in a folder on my desktop just in case, but I have not needed it. The new management company sends monthly transparency reports, and the board has committed to holding quarterly town halls where homeowners can ask questions and raise concerns. It is not perfect, but it is functional, and that is more than I could say a year ago. I learned a lot from the whole ordeal, but the biggest lesson was that power unchecked will always find a way to abuse itself, and the only real defense is vigilance and transparency. Cynthia was not a cartoon villain. She was just someone who was given too much authority and too little oversight, and she used that combination to create a system that benefited her at the expense of everyone else. The fact that it took a cease and desist letter, an emergency board meeting, and a forensic audit to stop her is a reminder that the systems we build are only as strong as the people willing to hold them accountable. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next HOA story.